mainly democracy and human rights on the continent. I'm just glad to be here, and I guess today anything less than reparation is a provocation. People, at least in West Africa, we've reached a point where the information and the knowledge about what has happened have now gotten to places and spaces where it was not before, and it will be hard to manage a people who know their history. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Cam Howard. I am a 3-term elected leader of the oldest and largest Black reparations organization in America. No longer with that organization in COBRA, the National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America. I'm now director of Reparations United, which looks at the energy in America on the local levels and how we can unify cities who are struggling against the same injury, and how we can unify cities who are affected by the same perpetrator. It might be a national organization or a national institution, but those cities are grappling with the same perpetrator or the same injury. And so how do we unify forces locally to address repair in this manner while we're fighting for federal legislation? Historically, the organization I was with stated that there were 4 legs of the reparations movement that the movement rests on. One was legislation, pushing some type of law through the federal, state, or local levels. The other was litigation, attempting to utilize law and get redress from the courts. The third was mobilization. How do you mobilize the masses around this complex issue of reparations to the point where you're able to drive decision makers and policy makers into a position where they actually target resources for our repair? And then the fourth level was, how do we internationalize our issue, utilizing either international instruments or international bodies, or collectively moving on an international level, again, against the same perpetrators. So that is really what I want to bring to the table discussion around evidence-based repair, is how do we move on these 4 legs in which the reparations movement stand on?
Thank you so much, Cam. I want to ask, I don't know if you have a second microphone there. If the tech can. So while we're getting the microphones, the 2 additional microphones set up, I want to delve into just a couple of points that were brought up, particularly around the tools that can be used to make the evidence-based case for reparations, and we'll definitely go further into that. There's another point with regard to the storytelling component and Kumba as a storyteller, and why that is so essential to being able to make the case, not just to elected officials, not just to heads of state and the like, but to each other, to our neighbors, to our friends, to our families, because after all, we have to win our people over into this work first and foremost. But I want to turn to Jefta to talk specifically about the context of Namibia. We have a short film, or clip rather, that we'll hopefully be able to show to all of you throughout the course of this, this convening, that talks about what happened in Namibia and the push for reparations. And Jefta is deeply engaged in that work. And so Jefta, I wanted to turn to you to talk just for a few minutes about the Namibia context and why it is so crucial to this discussion.
All right. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I'm trying to be brief, but I'm also trying to take where are we now. And last year in July, the German government, for the first time, admitted that they committed genocide in Namibia against the Herero and Nama people. And they said, the foreign minister said, we will now officially refer to these events as what they are from today's perspective, a genocide. And in light of the historic and moral responsibility of Germany, we will ask Namibia and the descendants of victims for forgiveness. Then he went further to say, we will provide a gesture to recognize the immense suffering inflicted on the victims. And we will pay an amount of 1.1 billion euros to pay for projects. And we said, like, to pay for projects, and you are providing a gesture. Still, they fell short of recognizing the genocide they committed, because even he went further and said, like, he said, not like, well, if we say that we are paying reparations to the Herero and Nama genocide, then it will open the doors to the Greeks and others to come and ask for reparations. The arrogance of Germans. So most of you here probably don't know much about the genocide in Namibia. It was the first genocide of the 20th century. It happened between 1904 and 1908. Of course, it's a typical African case where Europeans came and wanted to reclaim or claim land and push out the people. But the Herero people refused. So there was a long battle lasted a year, and finally we were defeated, or my people were defeated. But the German went further, that in order for us to defeat these people, we need to really push them out of Namibia. And so they made a military strategy to push the Herero, the fleeing heroes, into the Omaheke, or what you call Kalahari Desert. So a lot of people perished in the desert. But since the Germans were defeated in the earlier battles, they were not happy. So the German general who led the war issued an extermination order against Herero, regardless of women or children. So they did a lot of systematic killing. So when there was an uproar in Berlin about this military strategy, they said, okay, we are now going to, all the fleeing heroes should come back, those surviving Hereros. And then they constructed concentration camps. So the first German concentration camps were established in Namibia, practiced under the Hereros and Namas. Not only did they do that, they even invited Eugen Fischer, the architect of racial superiority theory, to come to Namibia and conduct medical experiments about his racial theories on the Herero and Nama people, and forced those survivors in the concentration camps to work on railways. So at the end of the war, by 1908, 80 to 85% of the Herero population was exterminated. And at the same time, 50% of the Nama people were exterminated, and they have lost 100% of their land and 100% of their properties, because that was the German government, that these people should no longer exist as a tribe, and any property they had, cattle and goats, now belong to the German state, and any piece of land they own belong to the German state. So that is what happened in Namibia, and today the German thing is worth 1.1 billion euros that will be paid over 30 years. What an insult. And also we talk about the role of African governments, but the role of African government, now as I said, this genocide reduced the Herero people to a permanent minority. They cannot participate in the political process. So the government of the Namibia, which was a revolutionary, led by a former revolutionary party, refused to advocate on behalf of the Ovahero and Nama people. Why? Because immediately after independence, the Germans seized a moment to come to the Namibian government and say, we have moral and historic responsibility towards Namibia. We never know what the definition, why they said that, even though they killed as many people in Tanzania. So we are going to provide with the fundings, the so-called bilateral aid. So the government of Namibia made the tactical or bilateral decision agreement that the issue of genocide is just incorporated in that bilateral aid. So the Namibian state has been reluctant and is still reluctant to advocate fully on behalf of the Waherero. So the agreement that they had, where the German offered $1.1 billion, the German government basically said, appoint your representative, we are going to appoint ours to make an agreement. But they didn't appoint those two people because they wanted to. It was after such a long, long struggle that I don't have time to talk about. But our former chief, who filed a lawsuit in the United States, and we filed a last lawsuit that was dismissed at the Supreme Court level in the United States. But in the process, we mobilized the international communities to listen to our case, and we morally shame Germany that basically what happened in Namibia is equivalent to what happened against the Jewish people, and they're still paying them today. What is the difference? The medical experiments, the concentration camps. And so we move a needle in terms of activism, having mobilized scholars to write about our case, and form a relationship with the civil society in Germany and other places to advocate our case. But we have not had friends in Africa or even African American or diasporan, as we say, referred to be part of this struggle. We don't think that our case is so unique, but it's so unique in the design because it was a government policy of systematically exterminating people. And basically, one of the horrors of the Germans, in those concentration camps, they will find people, men mostly, and say like, okay, this one was involved in the rebellion, the so-called rebellion, and they will hang them out. And then what they did is basically cut off their head and force the women to scrape, boil it, force the women to scrape the scars, and this is documented. The funny thing and the weird thing about Germany, they document their crimes. And then they ship those skulls to Berlin for examination. So we have over 1,000 human skulls from the Nama and Ovahero people lying in Berlin. And so the first one they refused, as the gentleman for Caribbean said, like they used to say, we regret. And they referred to that as an atrocity. It was an insult. But we pushed on, and finally said, yeah, we are going to, it's a genocide, but in historical terms, not as today's terms. And we're still refusing. But then we forced them to repatriate the human remains, and we forced that as a political and mobilization tool, and we get a lot of mileage from that. And so the only part that I'm asking, for the African Union brothers and even us, is to try to rethink about the African government role into advocating on behalf of those communities that were affected. We are all affected by colonialism, but this dependency relation with African governments on foreign funding also affect the way we fight our struggles. And so we need some African unions and African organizations like this even to advocate for us, not necessarily as we are a special case, but also as a springboard towards a global, broader reparation agenda and demand and justice.
Thank you so much for that. There are a couple of things that you said that I want to highlight for the audience. One is the irony of the Germans documenting their evils for posterity, apparently, but as we're talking about the evidence-based case for reparations, they have done a good enough job of documenting their crimes against humanity, so that's something to note. And then the other point that we definitely don't want to miss is the ability to have the autonomy to fight the fights that we need to fight without being dependent on funding from the very same entities and governments that are responsible for the atrocities. And this is a critical conversation that we have to have as we look at how our movements are supported. And even as we think about governments and the level of independence that heads of state have to foreign powers, colonial entities, and how that impacts our ability to fight the fights in the way that we need to fight, and even to have states advocating on behalf of their own people. So these are really important points that that I feel we need to emphasize for the purposes of this discussion. I wanted to ask Kumba, because there was another point that came up, Jefta, in your comments around the notion of how we engage each other, even on the continent, in the diaspora, how we engage people to learning more about, for example, Namibia, and the importance of storytelling to engaging other Africans, whether here or around the world, so that they can join in, or at least be aware of and get involved in some of these fights. Kumba.
Thank you so much, and thank you again for sharing. We hear and we know these stories, but every day when we hear it, we cannot but stop a minute and recognize that we've been through a lot as a people, and the stories keep coming. The story that I will share is a simple one, but I choose this one because I feel like we're talking about evidence-based, so I feel like it's maybe one of the easiest one to look at. December 1st, 1994. The French military bombs, I want to say execute or do a massacre in a small town called Charoy. It's a military camp. In this military camp, there are military that are called tirailleurs sénégalais. They are people who were drafted across West Africa. They're called tirailleurs sénégalais, but they're people across West Africa who were from the French colonies, who were drafted to go and help France fight the Germans. They fought in that war. Many of them, some of them got to be prisoners of the Germans, who considered because they are black, didn't want them even as prisoners, they didn't want them on German land. So they had to be German prisoners in France. 1944, it's almost the end of the war. The French got enough help, and now we're getting towards winning that war. They figured out that they didn't want black militaries to be part of the winners. They had to whiten the army so that it is recognized that it is the French army and white people who actually liberated them. They deport these tirailleurs sénégalais, these black military, back to Africa, so back to Dakar. Charoy is very close to Dakar, in this military camp, and they wait to be what they call demobilized so they can go back to their families. They were promised as they left France that they would be paid some dimes, money, for the work that they've been doing as militaries. In Charoy, they ask to be paid before leaving. And on the December 1st, the night of this, the day before December 1st, very heavy artillery is put on around Charoy. They are round up, they are unarmed, and they are bombed. Instead of paying them, they kill them. Now, what is really, striking about this particular case is that the documents, interestingly, people, when they are transferred like this, their names are written, where they are going, etc. But still, still today, the story goes that some documents say 35 people were killed. Some other stories says that 70 people were killed. But the reality is between 300 and 400 people killed. And the French government they didn't do, I guess it's a regret again, or some type of words, everything but, recognizing that it was a massacre. It was disguised as a mutiny happened. And also to disguise the fact that there were so many people killed, another document was written to pretend that on the way from France to Africa, some 300 soldiers had disappeared in Casablanca. So we have some false documents that have been forged to cover up a massacre like this. Of course, there's been people since that time that have been working on this. I mean, some of you have seen maybe the film, it's a movie by Ousmane Sembène called Camp de Charoy that speaks about this. That's an old movie. But even lately, a group of young people, these are musicians, rap artists, theater people who live in Charoy have also been digging and finding things. And I would quote Dr. Diallo Diop, who's from the party in Senegal, who today put a bill at the National Assembly to say, just give the information, like all the evidences, the informations are there. And where it happened in Charoy, the cemetery and the places where people are buried are still there. It's very simple to dig up. You can recognize between 35 skull and 300 skull. And the documents that are sealed that used to belong to the French government have been now transferred to the Senegalese government. And we're just asking, open this document out so we know who was there. It's very simple to figure that out. I tell this story, but it's only one story among many. But it's extremely important that, I guess, for us in movements, to be able to teach or to learn how you do research, how you write down things that you hear, because we, all of us, had our grandparents. We lived with the people who came back from France, who fought for France during the World War II. And those people have been there next to us and could tell us the stories of how they lived through, these situations. And there's still more that can be documented even today. There's still a lot of document available, a lot of people who have the stories and the memories that can tell us. And it has to be something systematic in our movement building. That's for now what I want to share. I could say more, but governments, companies, universities, I don't know, whatever institutions that have benefit from basic theft and murder of people, they need to release those resources. People talk about, oh, it's not only about money. What the money needs to get out. If you've stolen something, it's not yours. Now we can have a conversation about who does it go to, how will it go, where it will go, but the reality and the simple fact that today we live in our countries with companies, businesses that are grandchildren or great-grandchildren of businesses that were set up for slave trade. And they still are the one today that makes the most money on our land today. We're not talking about the past. And we can directly trace back where the money came from, how they set up those businesses through those inheritances model. So we have a long way to go, but we have the tools. We know, we can find the link, and there are clear evidences that can be put out. Thank you.
Thank you for that statement, Kumba. And I'll turn to Cam in a bit to unpack a little bit more, because I know that you've been doing a lot of that work with regard to companies and cities that have a history of being involved in the slave trade, of benefiting financially from enslavement. And so I want to come back to you to unpack some of that work in your advocacy. But I wanted to turn to you, Miriam, as being a special mandate holder with the United Nations Working Group of Experts on People of African Descent. And just given what we've heard from Jefta with the context of Namibia and Kumba and the atrocities from African people who fought in a European war and then were killed, essentially because that's what happened, because they didn't want to pay them. From the UN perspective, and as working with the Working Group of Experts, how are these accounts, how are they being documented? How is the working group working to address these stories and this evidence as you push for advocacy on behalf of people of African descent?
So as independent experts, it's working? Okay. So as independent experts, the working group is luckily mandated to do fact-finding country visits, which is one of the most important things, important elements of our work, because we can go to, except Africa, we can go to almost anywhere in the world where the respective government accepts our request. And the most important part of this fact-finding country visits are not meeting with the officials, hearing how wonderfully they are doing to end or eliminate racism, but meeting the community, civil society. We have the chance to visit a prison or a refugee camp and hear stories of the individuals, the heartbreaking stories, victims of hate crimes, surviving families of people who were murdered simply because of the color of their skin. And this can be really heartbreaking, but it gives us the evidence. And it gives us the opportunity to prepare our reports and actually present them to the General Assembly of the UN and also the Human Rights Council. So even though it's not as effective as we would want it to be, but still the stories of these individuals whose faces and names do not get to the UN, but their stories do. What happened to them? We have witnessed so many victims coming out with extraordinary stories, and not only victims, but just people from the communities, like how hard they try to strive, and how hard the system tries to stop them from being able to do it. And based on what my sister and my brother said, there are just a few things that came to my mind. So prior to the time we started the panel, when we were talking about that, yes, it's going to be about evidence-based cases, or how do we make the evidence. And I might call it a genocide even. So what happened in Melilla a few weeks ago? It happened on the 24th of July, and I received the footages recorded by some of those who were there on the 25th. I was completely heartbroken, and I could not stand watching how the bodies of injured people and murdered people were just thrown on each other, on piles. I just didn't know what to do or what to say. I just felt paralyzed. And I was thinking about that really nothing changed, that they might call it a different name, but we still live in the same system. The system has not changed. And what we really have to learn is solidarity. We have to learn to show and practice solidarity towards each other, because the little cases, the little evidences and stories we have, murders of 300 people, those who cannot fully fight for themselves because they are not given the chance to. If we can just stand united and say that, yes, we are one people, then those little voices, the 10 people here, the 100 there, the 40 million, is going to become something that the world and the current world order cannot ignore anymore. So we have to learn solidarity, and we also have to learn how to respect ourselves, how to respect our bodies, and how to respect others in our communities. Because this is one of the sickening legacies of the white supremacy that was forced on us, that somehow we just, as a people, stopped respecting ourselves. The way young people talk to each other, the names they call each other, many times, they think it's cool, they think that it's trendy, but actually we have to tell them the stories and teach them, because if we learn to respect ourselves, our bodies, and each other properly, then nobody can break that. Because this is something so strong when we are united in dignity. Because we have that dignity. We have to reclaim that human dignity and make everybody understand around us that no matter what they think, but we know who we are. And we don't care what they think about us, because we have the power, we have the capacity within ourselves, with the solidarity, with the unity, with the respect, and with the dignity, to say that enough is enough. And talking about evidence, evidence is really everywhere. If we look around today, it is still the same world order. And as it's been mentioned, the companies, corporations, as His Excellency the President was talking about the reparations paid in the UK, in the US, in many countries, even in the Caribbean, the Anglican Church filed for reparations for the losses they suffered when the system of slavery was officially ended. England was still paying until 15 years ago to the descendants of those who claimed that they lost money from banning the illegal trading of enslaved Africans. So what other evidence do we need? If those people felt that they had the right to get reparations for what they lost, then what are we actually talking about? And yes, of course, this is not only, we are not just looking for a paycheck. We are looking for the world order to change, the entire economic system. What we really need is creating that safe space for ourselves where we can become strong enough to have that economic influence, which is going to be followed by political influence, because it is money that talks. So if we have the economic influence, if we have the economic power, then we can really be effective in getting the justice and the kinds of reparations we want. Because the legal framework does exist. It exists. It's there in the UN Declaration. There are precedents for the Holocaust, for many other events that happened. So all we have to do is to be really systematic and really do as much documentation as we can. Also to prove that we are not talking about the legacies of colonialism and the enslavement and illegal trading of Africans. They are not just legacies. The system still exists in many different ways. It exists in Africa, how the countries are being exploited, how, for example, Francophone countries are still paying for their freedom till today, how France also played a crucial role in the Rwandan genocide that, of course, they don't want to talk about, how they are playing games, the UK, Holland, what is happening in the Caribbean, not only with Haiti, which is more than a shame on humanity that it could happen, them paying for 121 years for their freedom. And happening, of course, everywhere. In Brazil, somebody said it a few weeks ago, I heard it in Brazil, there is a George Floyd every single day. The police raids on favelas saying that they want to eliminate gang members, but they are just murdering completely innocent young people. And in the US, we know what is happening. Both the school to prison system, the healthcare system, how we don't have the same chances in healthcare, in education, in housing, in getting jobs. But we have to find the ways, and the only way to do it is if we do it together, if we listen to each other, if we tell each other the stories, the ideas, if we, even if not literally, but we just sit around the fire like it used to be in the village and just look at the moon. Of course, everyone could see the moon from their own backyards, but looking at it together in the center of the village and telling stories is completely different. And just to finish quickly, I wanted to tell you a personal story that there are things that really define people, and this is linked to storytelling in many ways. So I was quite little growing up when I first watched Roots on the TV. And as the importance of storytelling for 7 generations, the family members, the descendants of Kunta, kept repeating the same story, that he said that he went to look for wood in the forest to make a drum, and that was how he was captured and stolen and enslaved. And when Alex Haley was doing his research and he nearly gave up, he went to a village in the Gambia, and one griot who knew the stories of the clans and the families, remembering stories of hundreds of years, he was just sitting there. He was bored. Alex Haley was bored. He was not listening anymore because the griot was talking for days and days, because he knew the story of everybody. There was no need to write anything down because he knew everything. And then suddenly he started talking about this family, this father and mother whose son went to the forest to look for wood to make drum, and they never saw him again. And that was how he found his family. And if we tell each other enough stories, we are going to realize that we all belong to the same one family.
Thank you. I wanted to, did you have a comment, Dr.?
No, I mean, listen to the power of the story, and we have all stories, but when I asked my grandmother, like, what happened to your grandmother? Did you get to see her? She said, no. My grandmother, people were fleeing, and she was too old and tired. So the people left her under a tree to die. That's how the story was. And I wrote a poem from my book that I want to read if I have 1 minute. It's not long, and it's titled No Shame. My story is not old. It is being told. Oh, the arrogance of victors to set timeline. The arrogance of killers to set guidelines. My story is not history. It is about the burden of memory. It is about speaking up. I will not keep my mouth shut. My story is about my identity. It is about my misery. It is about my disposition. It is about liberation. My story is righteous. It is timeless. It is extraordinary. It is revolutionary. My story is not old. Oh, it is being told now. It is timeless. I can't remain silent.
Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing that with us. I wanted to turn to Cam, and I love the fact that this panel, this is making the evidence-based case for reparations, and we have spent the majority of the time talking about stories and storytelling. And I think it's important to note that oftentimes when we hear the word evidence and we talk about making evidence-based cases for anything really, there tends to be this notion that the evidence is quantitative, that it lives in charts and graphs and databases. And there is sometimes this notion of delegitimizing or marginalizing the stories that people have. And as Africans, our way of conferring knowledge, information, our history is through the stories that we tell each other. And so as we look at our work moving forward, when you hear the word evidence-based, the evidence-based case, is not to use the perhaps Eurocentric notions of what evidence actually looks like, very linear, very cold, very disconnected, just the numbers, which has been quite harmful, which is the basis for global racial capitalism and many of the other systems that now govern our lives. But it's actually to think about the stories that we tell, because those are the things that move the spirit. And in this work, it's not just about making the best argument or the best theorizing or pontificating. It's how we move people's spirits, how we move our spirits, how we move hearts and minds to our position. So with that, I want to turn to Cam, because you've been doing this advocacy work with and facing many of those institutions, financial institutions, governments at the city level, the state level, the federal level. Can you talk about the importance of the stories that you bring in your advocacy and how you've used that to expose these institutions and these systems and to push them in the direction of repair that we're working toward?
Sure. Before I do that, I want everybody to repeat out after me, just get some energy in here real quick. Crimes. Injuries. Repair. Crimes. Injuries. Repair. Now let's say it another way. Harms. Legacy. Reparations. Harms. Legacy. Reparations. That's the model that the Durban World Conference Against Racism gave us to actualize our reparations, how we enforce our human right to be repaired. In Durban, the conclusion was that crimes against humanity have been committed against Africans people, and that there was a legacy, and those systems that existed there as part of that legacy, as a result of those crimes, or there were injuries that exist today in African people because of those crimes. And therefore, under international norms that we have, under international instruments that we have, reparations are due. And so if we take that particular model that Durban gave us, and piggybacking on Dr. Beckles, we say we're in this fifth wave because of Durban and because of this model. If we take that model, we can advocate for reparations anywhere on the planet where African people live with that same similar model, which was a Pan-African victory. You know, in America, there's this notion that Pan-Africanism is dead, right? Because they haven't seen they don't know what a Pan-African victory looked like. In Durban was the greatest Pan-African victory of the 21st century. It started with a group, one brother out of New York, went to Geneva met with a diplomat, a brother from Sudan, and said there needs to be another World Conference Against Racism. There hasn't been one since 1978. This was in 2019. The brother began to work at the diplomatic level, and within a year they were announcing that there would be a World Conference Against Racism being held in Durban. And then, as you know, in world conferences, you have 5 groups. You have the European group, the Asian group, the African group, the Western group, which is America, Canada, and India, Israel. I don't know how that's a Western group. And then you have the Caribbean and Latin American states. And so there was a preparatory meeting with the Latin American and Caribbean states in Chile. And the brothers and sisters from New York who started this initiative went down and said, we cannot all, as African people, go to the World Conference pushing all of our individual issues, because we have many. It's the same way when we're working in reparations now. He said, we need to focus on 3 issues. 1, that the transatlantic slave trade, enslavement was a crime against humanity. 2, that there was an economic benefit as a result of those crimes. And 3, reparations need to be paid. And so the Caribbean states agreed, yeah, we can go to Durban with this language. But the Latin American states said, nah, they was getting pushed back from the U.S. and said, if you go to Durban with that language, we're gonna, there's gonna be some repercussions. And so the Caribbean brothers held fast and forced them to adopt that language and send it to Durban. And then when it got to Durban, that's when the work began to bring the African nations in. Dr. Beckles talked about the disappointment that the African states did not hold fast, but they did hold fast to the language, some of the language anyway, that this transatlantic slave trade, it was a crime against humanity, that there was an economic component, and that reparations was due. The Asian nations said, well, we're not going to sign on unless the African nations come on. And so there was an intense effort to lobby African nations in Durban to get them to agree to this language being in the outcome document. And so it started in New York with one African American and his organization. It went to South America and to the Caribbean, then made its way to Africa, and the African group had to stand up, and it was a global Pan-African victory that has immense repercussions that we're feeling today, that all of us in this room, because of that Pan-African victory, that very few of us know about. And so we have this model, crimes, injury, and repair, that we've been able to use in America with corporations. We did an effort, that's where I met Amara. We were working against Norfolk Southern Railroad. And the railroads in America, during and after enslavement, they leased our brothers and sisters from enslavers to work on the railroad, clear land, do all this land of rails to fuel America's rail system. The rail system that's still being used in America today is moving trillions of dollars of merchandise every year is rails that our ancestors laid in America. And so after enslavement, there was a system called convict leasing, where they would lock people up, lock Africans up. They called it slavery by another name. They would lock black folks up with petty crimes, give them 5, 10, 15, 20 years in prison, and then lease them out to companies, to railroads, and to coal mines, et cetera. And the work post-enslavement was worse than during enslavement, because all they had to do was lock another person up, and they literally worked them to death, 16, 17 hours a day. And so we went up against this railroad, utilizing this model. Crimes have been committed. There's a legacy and injury, a legacy resulting from those crimes, so reparations needed to be done. We were not able to get what we wanted, which was, there was a $285 million project. We wanted 6% of that, which would have netted us $17 million in the city to leverage that up to about $60 million in development, which is what we were after. However, there were some other organizations that was after some things as well, and because we raised the issue of reparations in the manner that we did, they were able to get all of their demands and push us out. But it showed that the strength of this model, We wrote this model into the federal legislation, HR 40. Dr. Daniels is here. He talked about starting NARC, the National African American Reparations Commission, in 2015, patterned after the CARICOM Reparations Commission. And at our very first meeting of NARC, the issue of the federal legislation came up. And at that time, in my organization, I was the legislative commission chair, meaning that I was working in that organization. It was my job to push that particular legislation through Congress, or help move it through Congress. But my statement was, we abandoned this bill. My organization no longer even is endorsing this particular legislation, because the legislation, the way it was written, was that it had to measure or to determine whether there was still injury as a result of enslavement, as a result of post-Jim Crow crimes or apartheid crimes. Apartheid in America was called Jim Crow, but it's still apartheid. It was determined to study whether or not there was contingent injury. That was in 2014 when we had this meeting. But in 2001, Durbin had already settled it, right? That there was continued injury. So we didn't need to study whether or not there was continued injury, and that's why we are no longer supporting the bill. And so Dr. Daniels said, why don't we revise the bill? And so we revised the bill, and we personally wrote this model in the federal legislation. Now, we haven't passed this bill, but guess what? The state of California passed the bill. And they took the exact wording out of the federal bill that we wrote and put it into the state bill. And it's the model for the federal bill and other state bills that are being introduced, that they have to deal with the crimes. And we say there are three periods of crimes. It's the period of enslavement, the period of apartheid, which lasted in America from 1877. It was a 12-year period of Reconstruction, but after that, from 1877 to 1965, which was the civil rights bills that were passed, that legally ended apartheid in America, and then the post-apartheid period, which we call neo-apartheid. When you come to the African context, you still have three periods, right? You have what Professor Chinwezu called the chattelization wars, the wars across the continent to chattelize African people, children, women, men. After the chattelization wars, you had wars of colonialism until 1957, when this country was first gained its independence. And then you had the post-colonial period, which is this period today, which consists of neocolonialism, consists of a political reality that doesn't allow African people to really self-determine. So we still have these three periods of crimes. And we can look at all of the legacies on the continent. You can look at the legacies in the Caribbean. You can look at the legacies in the white settler states like Brazil, like America, like Canada, like Australia. And you can see the legacy. And this legacy really rests on, we talk about evidence. We rest our case in America, and I look for models and similarities that can be utilized in any situation, right? And what we do in the local spaces in America is use this model, crimes, injury, repair, and that the legacy of those crimes rests in three areas. One is genocide. Wherever you find the infant mortality rate lower than the infant mortality rate of whites, that's genocide. Because genocide just doesn't mean killing in whole, it also means killing in part, right? Anything that leads to the early death of African people based on public policy is genocide. But genocide also is creating conditions where my people will kill themselves, or creating conditions of mental health, right? Or mental injury. All of these things exist in spaces where African people have been affected by the crimes of enslavement, the crimes of colonialism, the crimes of the chattelization wars, the crimes of apartheid that still exist. So you'll see evidence of genocide, infant mortality, higher rates of maternal mortality, lower life expectancy, higher rates of mental disease, higher rates of trauma-induced adverse childhood experiences that produces the type of behavior in our youth that is anti-life for our youth, that is self-destructive for our youth. You'll find these in every context where these crimes have been committed. The second evidentiary basis is apartheid. When you look in these spaces and you see disparity, you see evidence of apartheid, because apartheid means separate development, right? It's resources were spent among one group and retarded in another group. And so you have this huge amount of disparity in wealth and education and housing, et cetera. So wherever you see disparity, you see apartheid. And then the third evidentiary basis that we use is plunder. With these crimes came an economic benefit through the plundering of African resources, whether it's African labor, or African mineral resources, African intellectual resources. You'll find plunder in these areas. So we base the crimes and the legacy in these three areas, and we can make the case. In Evanston, they made the case on redlining. They made the case on over-policing. Those are apartheid area crimes, apartheid type crimes. And so you can utilize this model in every African environment: crimes, injury, repair, harms, legacy, reparations. And so where there's been crimes committed, and you find the legacy, the natural or the legal obligation on the part of the injuring party is to engage in reparations under these international norms that exist. And that reparations must be full reparations. And full reparations have the 5 components. As Robin was talking about earlier, there's hundreds of cities doing reparations, but most of their reparations in the area of satisfaction, apologies, emoluments, museums. How do you return the dignity back to a people is what the satisfaction component is about. But you also have 4 other areas. One is cessation and guarantees of non-repetition, and that's where you're talking about destroying these systems that exist and creating new systems where those type of injustices don't renew themselves. So cessation and guarantees of non-repetition is one of the components of reparation, for reparations. A second one is restitution. How do you return people back to where they would have been had they not been injured, had these crimes not been committed in the first place? That's where your housing and your education and your health type, not so much health, in certain instances health, but those type of things, those type of reparative initiatives that take a people back to where they would have been had they not been repaired. And then you have compensation for damages. And then finally you have rehabilitation, which leads to the health areas for spiritual and mental and emotional healing. So that also was wrote into the federal legislation. So the federal legislation in America must produce outcomes in each of these areas based on this particular model. They're undergoing it in California now. They're testing it in California now, which is the largest state in America and has the 5th largest economy if it was a country in the world, if it was a country. So we have this huge economy in America that is utilized in this particular model. We utilize it on the local level in certain areas. It is what we presented at the Vatican 2 weeks ago. We utilized the same model in the form of a presentment to the Roman Catholic Church, because most people don't know that it was the Roman Catholic Church that ordered what has become known as the transatlantic slave trade. They ordered Portugal to go into Africa and pillage the people and submit their people to a perpetual enslavement. This is an edict by the Catholic Church, and they continue those edicts for centuries. And so we use this same model. I'm going to end with this quote from Bishop Ty. This is our first response that we got from the Roman Catholic Church, utilizing this model, this global model. I don't know what I do with my glasses. Oh, thank you, sister. And you'll find that he understands the significance of this model. I asked him to comment on what his first thoughts was on the presentment. He said, "I have noted the contents of the presentment, and I am seeking to understand which agencies and offices at the Holy See will be best positioned to engage the materials which raise significant issues of historical, moral, and legal nature." Right? Which offices and agencies? That means they have to assemble their best minds in the Holy See in the Roman Catholic Church globally to address this resentment, to address that crimes were committed, that there's a legacy of those crimes, and there's an international legal framework which says you must address African people globally in the context of reparations. And he says significant issues of historical crimes, moral, the legacy, and then legal is reparations. He got it, right? We have to get it globally. African people, and the more we get it, then we're going to receive our reparations, or what Dr. Bobby Wright says, Lasima Tashinde and Bilishaka. We will be victorious without a doubt.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Cam, for sharing, and for sharing the quote, because I remember we talked after the meeting, and we were just unpacking how the meeting went, and that quote in particular, when you reiterated it, I mean, it's significant, because there is the acknowledgement not only of the crimes, but of the need, the imperative for repair, and to marshal all of the agencies and departments within the Catholic Church and around the world, right? So this wasn't limited to just our time at the Vatican. We were talking about Central and South America. We were talking about the continent. We were talking about it in the US. And to have that acknowledgement is a testament of the work of those who've come before us, who've laid the foundation for us to now be able to go to the Vatican using that framework around repair, around crimes, repair. And so this is such a critical conversation. And I want to ask, because we are running to the end of our session, if the panelists, I'm sure there are some questions from the audience, so if the panelists are able to sort of hang out a little bit for folks who may have questions that they can engage one-on-one. But I wanted to give an opportunity for each of you to, just as a final response to this question and what we've been discussing around evidence and storytelling and this framework for reparations, if you can respond to the question of what in this moment gives you hope as this work moves forward. In spite of the challenges, we know there are significant challenges, but what is something that gives you hope in this moment?
Thank you so much, brother, for this. As I listen to you, what comes to my mind also is that we are in the process, and we are ourselves doing some pieces of the reparation that is needed, because with everything that has been done, I think there is one part also that needs to be repaired, which is our relationship with each other, of people on the continent and people who now are in the Caribbean, in the Americas, in Brazil and so on. And that's part of the reparation part. We need to be able to come back together. And maybe in this room, we are maybe among the few of Africans, global Africans, on the continent that see each other and hear each other. There's so many of us that have no consciousness of each other, and that needs to change. At least for me, my path and how I have been into this is connected to being deeply connected and building bridges between us. And I can recall my first trip to the US, 1996. We were 22 million. Some of us have never even been to the big city. To land to the US, and the first place we went was Selma, Alabama. And we visited the South. We met with farmers. We met with people in churches, universities, artists. And it completely changed and shifted not only our ways and our mindset, but anybody who were connected to us through the work that we were doing in popular education. But it also changed people that we visited who also came to West Africa. I'm talking about 20 years of back and forth, of teachers, of young people, of farmers, people visiting highlanders, coming to Mali, going to Tombouctou, going to Senegal, listening to these stories. And it also transformed completely. I mean, you would names that, I'm sure from the US people would know people like Latosha Brown, Senator Hank Sanders and Fayo Rose, and Tarana Burke. These are people that we slept in the same houses with. And there's something about that that needs to continue. Somehow, we have to find a way for our children to connect and to know about each other's story, because that's part of the reparation. Because the brokenness and the fact that we don't know anymore each other's story is part of what separates us and doesn't, link us. What gives me hope is that today we have more possibilities and capacities to connect than we've ever had. It is possible for our children to talk to each other directly. There is Google Translate. For God's sake. It didn't exist before. All of these tools that we have today, we never had it before. We have a historic moment to connect directly without any intermediaries to know what's going on. And we need to seize it. What gives me hope, believe it or not, I mean, he talks about how German was so particular about writing down things. They did it all over the place. We talk about slavery. Many of you have seen these 2 minutes that shows the boats crossing. Every boat, at least many of the boats that left the continent, somebody sat down and wrote down that this number of people was embarked. And when they take the ship there, somebody wrote it down that this number of people disembarked. You can make the subtraction and you know how many people died. There is a 2 minute, you can find it where you see the boats moving, like a graphic on slate.com. You can see the graphic of every boat you can click on, and you can see this boat, this was the captain, this is which place it left from, and this is where it disembarked. You can see it like this. It's actually something. People wrote things. In 2003, Perrank Production published a book by Jules Marchal. It's called Forced Labor in the Gold Mining in the Congo. Somebody sat down and wrote things. Like, it's a boring book, but somebody wrote down everything that was happening every day. And it's actually incredible. If the evidence, it's there. If people want to see, they can see it. Now the question is the world ready? Is the world ready to see Africans as human beings that deserve reparation? And that's the question we need to ask. When people are ready, we have everything we need. Everything we need, we have it. Thank you.
What kept me hopeful is that's a question. When the late chief started this demands for Germany to apologize, his own people, including me, didn't believe we had law. We thought this man has gone mad. And even literally people said that the Germany will never do that. But he was my elder, but he always tended to call me oh, come, bring your camera and be with me. And things progressed from 0 to the first statement I read that the Germans are willing to apologize. And so that's hope that things happen. And the mere presence that you took an initiative to organize this summit in Ghana, I remember when you started, I was like, it's going to happen, but I don't know how many people are going to come, in my mind. because the planners were only few. But then the presence of all of us sitting here, taking a risk during these pandemic times, you're sitting with your mask on, still sitting and listening to us. What is it where I'm thinking like, why are these people, why are we sitting here, all these individuals sitting here? Because they have a belief. And if you have so many people in this room like now, we can multiply as we connect through our stories and through our struggle. The challenge is like, how do we replicate our story and connect them so that we can fulfill the mission of what this summit want to achieve, which is to amplify our global struggle for reparations and share ideas, not necessary ideas, share soldiers in our struggle, where I could even invite you to Namibia or to a Namibian conference and help us with the new strategies that you develop or your wisdom that you have done through Durban conference and all those stuff we need to share, because one victory is our victory.
Thank you. What gives me hope at this moment is this very moment, actually, and moments like this. Moments that turn into stories. Moments like this where I feel the energy, the warmth, the love, that belonging, that oneness. And now, today, we are here experiencing this together. Whenever I go to any place, meeting with members of the community, whether they are from favelas or the academia, is the same thing I feel. And it gives me so much strength and power. And I do feel that energy, not just the energy that the synergy we have put together. But I do know that the ancestors are watching, they are waiting. And when we become ancestors, I would like our children, our children's children, tell stories like even in 7 generations to come, to say that that woman, that man, the mother, the father, the great-grandmother, the great-grandfather of this and that person did this, did that, and today we are where we are partly because of them. And this is what gives me hope. What gives me hope is my children, my own children, who know that I am not with them at this moment, on these days, because I am here working for their own future too. Them understanding what we are fighting for. What gives me hope is after the reckless murder of George Floyd, when it went viral, my daughter, who was less than 13, instantly posted on her Instagram, "I can't breathe." And that gave me the hope, because they are going to continue our work, and we have to tell them our stories, our grandparents' stories. And it's just going to happen.
Thank you. There's a lot that gives me hope. I'm really super excited to be in the reparations movement at this time. As I stated, the organization that I was formerly leading is the oldest organization in America that's fought for reparations. And it began in 1980. 1987, and I joined in 2006. And when I had joined, people were telling me that the reparations movement was dead. I mean, I went to elders, man, trying to get some mentorship. Man, the movement is dead. I got that from so many places. But I stuck in there because I thought this was my mission. And then in 2009, I watched about 8 hours of, over 3 days, the Durban World Review Conference. And I watched how state after state came up and said what they were doing with the spirit of Durban, especially Brazil, who lifted 23 million people out of poverty over a 7-year period, utilizing the spirit of Durban. I saw what Zimbabwe did with their economic indigenization program. I saw what CARICOM was doing, with the spirit of Durban, and it led me to write a piece saying that Durban had the ability to undo the damages of 2 other great significant documents in the last 600 years that had this devastatingly negative effect on Africa and Africa's children. The first document was the papal bull, the Dum Diversas, which ordered Portugal to go into Africa and wreak all type of havoc and plunder and submit their children to perpetual enslavement. Had a devastating effect on the continent. The second document was the 1897 and 98 Berlin Act, which partitioned Africa up and set in motion the colonization of the continent. After seeing what was done in Durban Review Conference, I said, this particular document, if we utilize it, can reverse all of that. And, that's why I'm still fighting today, because we're seeing more and more people utilize this model, and I think the more we put it out there, the more victory we will have, and that over some decades, we can begin to see some reverse. This is a long-range project. We didn't get in this space overnight, and we're not going to get out of it overnight. This is a long-range project. Some people here may be in their 30s. You may be still on this in your 60s. And know that, you're doing the ancestors' work. You're doing the children's work. You're doing the work of the future, because what we're looking for is repair. What gives me also hope is, like I said, when I got it took about from 2006 to 2014 in America before anybody started taking reparations seriously. Other than those of us who was in the movement, in the Black Power movement, and the radical movement. And that was with Ta-Nehisi Coates' article, The Case for Reparations. It's a mainstream article in the Atlantic magazine. From there, we began to pick up steam. And just recently, we had over 360 mainstream organizations sign on to H.R. 40. That was unheard of 10 years ago. We've had corporations engaged in reparations. For 33 of the 35 years, NCOBRA was funded solely on membership dues. And our membership dues is $25 a year. We were struggling to keep members, right? So how much can you do with $25 a year with about 900 members? Sometimes, at one time, we might have had about 13,000 members at the high rate. But how much can you do with $25 a year off that membership base? Now we have foundations funding the movement. So having this historical view of the movement and seeing where we are today, can't help but be inspired. I am excited to be in this movement at this particular time where we can actually, like my sister Robin and Evanston, begin to deliver repair to our people. Not just talk about it, but begin to deliver the actual repair that's necessary to move us out of a state of injury into a state of wholeness and healness. And so I'm excited and extremely hopeful.
Can we give a round of applause for our panelists? Another round of applause for our panelists. I will ask if our photographers can take our, I guess now is customary, picture with the panelists. And while they are assembling themselves, just to reference what we have next coming up on the agenda, we'll have a short break before our final session of the evening. which will be the Shanta Roxanne and Christy Higgins on freeing ourselves from the centuries-old lie of white superiority and black inferiority. I don't know if I'm in this picture. I don't know. Excellent. So we'll have about a 10-minute break, and we're asking folks to reconvene in this space at 5 o'clock for our final session of the day. And after that session, we'll have just brief announcements to remind everyone on the protocols for this evening, for the dinner for this evening.
To our distinguished guests, delegates, representatives, and family members from the global Africa. My name is Chandra Roxanne, Special Ambassador for Community Healing Network, an organization founded 16 years ago by Anola Aird, our visionary and deeply passionate president, and my elder, with whose blessings and under whose tutelage I come before you today. With thanks to God and my ancestors, I am also here as a descendant of enslaved Africans and of the Piscataway Indians in southern Maryland in the United States of America. I would like to begin by telling you a story. The exhibition in New Haven, Connecticut was called The Rise and Fall of the N-Word. I see her, a painting of an African woman sprawled across the ocean floor, pregnant. Each hand and foot contains remnants of metal shackles that once held her captive. Immediately, 20 years of my own shame of being both a woman and a descendant of enslaved Africans rushed to the surface. Her body, lying on the ocean floor like discarded trash, symbolized my own feelings of being like trash. Until my work with Community Healing Network, I did not realize the root cause of my shame was the lie of white superiority and black inferiority. It had been hiding in plain sight for all of my life. Calling out the lie jump-started my escape from emotional and psychological captivity. When our African ancestors were legally freed from physical enslavement and from colonialism, there was no plan to expose the lie in all its manifestations and extinguish it until now. Since 2006, CHN has been leading the charge with laser-like focus to expose and distinguish the lie of white superiority and black inferiority, the root cause of the dehumanization of Africans and people of African descent around the world. The power of the lie is in its invisibility. Its destructiveness, however, can be seen and felt everywhere. The brutal public murder of George Floyd was the incarnation of the lie of white superiority and black inferiority. The knee of a white police officer casually, delightfully, resting on the neck of a black man as he lay squirming on the ground, fighting to breathe and to live, fully embodies the false racial hierarchy of humanity. Whiteness sits on top of blackness. We witness not only the false narrative that whiteness confers maximum human value, but that it has full authority over blackness, which is automatically defined as subhuman. Just today, international news sources are reporting that a Nigerian man in Italy was beaten to death in broad daylight as onlookers stood by. Howard University professor Dr. Greg Carr has argued that black people are the only people born into a system where subhumanity is the organizing principle. We see this in the research of Stanford professor Dr. Jennifer Eberhardt and other scholars who have shown a persistent association between black people and apes. According to Eberhardt, there is one old race battle that we're still fighting, That battle for Black people to be recognized as fully human. Throughout history, different groups of people have been trafficked, enslaved, and colonized by others. But the transatlantic trafficking and enslavement of African human beings and the subsequent colonization of Africa was different. It marked an entire continent and its people as less than human, sanctioning the lie of white superiority and Black inferiority, and consigning African people to a degraded status, not just for the period of their enslavement, but in perpetuity. Our ancestors entered into a form of enslavement which, as a result of the lie, has been passed on to us and will be passed on to our children and our grandchildren unless we end it. And it is only us who can end it. This perpetual dehumanization fuels implicit biases against Black people in policing, employment, healthcare, education, and nearly every other area of our lives, with negative consequences for our health, safety, and prosperity. This is true wherever we find ourselves, in Europe, Asia, Latin America, Canada, the United States, the Caribbean, and even on this continent. The lie says that we and our children are not beautiful, lovable, capable, intelligent, valuable, or worthy as other people. The lie is the root cause of the distinctive hardships experienced by Africans and people of African ancestry all over the world. It is the ideological bulldozer that paved the way for the transatlantic trafficking of African human beings, the enslavement of our ancestors, the colonization of Africa and the Caribbean, our second-class citizenship in countries across the globe, as well as the continuing assaults on our dignity and our lives. Community Healing Network stands with you, fellow activists and delegates, in calling for full, comprehensive reparations and healing for Africa, Africans, and people of African ancestry. We also appeal to you to recognize that without intentional and aggressive steps to finally extinguish the lie of white superiority and Black inferiority, all other efforts aimed at reparations and healing for Black people will fall short. This is why, in addition to the initiatives aimed at psychological healing, in general, we need a global plan to prioritize healing from the multi-generational emotional damage caused specifically by the lie of white superiority and Black inferiority, the most powerful weapon ever formed against African people and the longest lasting legacy of enslavement and colonization. Today, August 1st, marks the anniversary of the abolition of enslavement in so many British colonies. A fitting time to remember, as Kwame Nkrumah said, freedom is not something one people can bestow upon another as a gift. They claim it as their own. Let us remember, as Marcus Garvey said, we must emancipate ourselves from mental slavery, because while others might free the body, none but ourselves can free the mind. Freedom from the lie is an indispensable foundation for emotional reparations, healing, wellness, and empowerment for Black people, which in turn is a prerequisite for healthy and prosperous Black communities. Black people are amazingly resilient, and we have made extraordinary progress against the odds arrayed against us by the lie. But we have had to fight for every piece of ground, and the price we have paid engaging in this constant struggle has been enormously damaging. Witness, for example, the plight of people of African descent in the Caribbean who, according to the CARICOM 10-point plan for reparatory justice, have the highest incidences in the world of chronic diseases in the form of hypertension and type 2 diabetes, and show evidence of massive psychological trauma. Unless the lie is dragged into the light and purged from our and the world's consciousness, it will remain invisible, unacknowledged, unchallenged, and it will continue to wield its devastating power. The lie of white superiority and black inferiority not only justified the physical brutalization, dehumanization, and enslavement and the colonization of our ancestors, it also justified their emotional enslavement. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. describes the 5 steps for turning independent Africans into emotional slaves in perpetuity. Step 1, unconscious, unconditional submission and obedience. Step 2, the development of a consciousness of inferiority. Step 3, installing a sense of awe. They must always stand in fear. Step 4, an insistence on the master's criteria for what is good and true and beautiful. And step 5, create in them a habit of perfect dependence upon their masters. To counter this emotional enslavement, King says, and I quote, "The Negro will only be free when he reaches down into the inner depths of his own being and signs with the pen and ink of assertive manhood his own emancipation proclamation," end quote. In the spirit of King, Nkrumah, Garvey, and so many other black leaders, CHN is building the global grassroots movement for emotional emancipation, for a complete freedom from the lie. We are, as James Baldwin wrote, a people trapped in history. But in the words of Enola Aird, we are escaping. CHN has established the infrastructure necessary to do the long overdue work of freeing ourselves from the lie. The movement for emotional emancipation is aimed at fostering the creation of flourishing black communities by clearing away the central barrier to black flourishing, the lie, and by helping to build a new culture of emotional emancipation, reparations, healing, wellness, and empowerment across global Africa. This movement is community-centered, and it subscribes to the idea of an African metaculture, an African identity in which differences of national and local cultures are recognized, but also transcended. The movement for emotional emancipation seeks to rescue and restore as normal and commonplace what Aikwe Arma calls a mind here and there that refused to die in the slaughterhouses of souls during the age of European violence. In all of its work, CHN seeks to carve out psychological, spiritual, and physical Black-only spaces for healing from the multi-generational damage caused by the lie, including our signature initiative, the Emotional Emancipation Circle. The EEC Circle is a culturally grounded self-help group, a process for intra-racial communal healing originated by CHN and developed in collaboration with our primary ally, the Association of Black Psychologists. The EEC Circle provides space for Black people to, 1, do the work necessary to write our own emotional emancipation proclamations and plans for escaping the Eurocentric narrative, and 2, work together to develop strategies to free the world of the lie forever. Together, CHN and ABSI have planted seeds for EE circles in more than 50 cities in the United States, the Caribbean, the United Kingdom, Ghana, South Africa, and with Dr. Cheryl Tawede Grills leading the Global EE Circles training team, and Dr. Christy Haggins, our ABSI liaison. It's amazing how much Black people have been able to accomplish while carrying the weight of the lie in our hearts, minds, spirits, and bodies for so very long. Just imagine what we and our children will be able to achieve once we take the time to heal and free ourselves from the lie once and for all. We are escaping the Eurocentric narrative grounded in the lie. Come with us. Join us as we co-create a renewed African narrative grounded in the truth of our humanity. We invite you to help make 2021 to 2030 the decade to defy the lie of Black inferiority and embrace the truth of Black humanity. As Enola always reminds us, our children and our ancestors are waiting. So now I'd like to lead you through a brief exercise designed to heighten our collective awareness of the lie and the truth as a prelude to our visit to Cape Coast tomorrow. So does everyone have a piece of paper? Everyone have a piece of paper? Wonderful. Wonderful. So this is going to take place in two parts. The first part, I'm going to ask you to write down the lies. What is said about Black people, African culture, you? What's said about that? We're going to have a quick discussion. And then the second part, I'm going to ask you to write down the truths. What is true about Black humanity? What is true about African humanity and African culture? And then we'll have a discussion about that. And then my colleague, Dr. Haggins, is going to lead us through a Sawubona meditation. So you have 3 minutes. Part one, what are the lies? And just let me put up my clock here. So, on the count, when I say go, I want you to write down every negative thing you have heard, thought about African, Black people, you, culture. Is everyone ready? Thumbs up. Everyone ready? Can I get an ashe? Everyone ready? Okay. Your time starts now. 3 minutes. Just a lie, just a lie. Two minutes. 1 minute. Twenty seconds. Five seconds. All right, time is up. Everyone have their lies? Everyone have their lies? So we have volunteers here on the right and on the left, and also Dr. Higgins has mics. I want you to tell me how you felt. Do not speak your lies. I want you to talk to me about what you felt. How did you feel inside writing those things down? How did you feel?
Just being able to enumerate them all had me feeling like these people really did a number on us.
It's been really a number on you.
They did a number on us.
They did a
yeah.
number on us. They did a number on us. This lady right here, Nancy. May I call you Nancy? No, Miss Wilson. Nia. Okay.
You know, I had to use my government name in order to get into everything, but I'm Nia. Yeah, it was hard for me to write. I actually couldn't write. It made me feel sick, nauseous, and very sad. Very, very sad.
Wonderful.
Wasn't able to really write much.
Sick, nauseous, very sad. Couldn't even write. Yes. Okay.
Very sad.
Sad. Very angry because she believed it. She believed it. And I want to bring your attention to these terms here: sad, angry, nauseous, sick. This is exactly what human beings feel. And that's exactly what we are, who we are. We're human beings. But the things that have been done to us, this makes sense that you would be angry. It makes sense that you would be sick and nauseous. It makes sense that you would sort of be stunned at what has been done to us. And yet we're still here. Anyone else?
This one in the back.
We have a volunteer. Oh, yes, ma'am.
Hi, yeah, it just makes you feel very tense and like you're just locked, saying all these things, you know it's not true, and yet my body had like a visceral reaction to it.
Love that. A visceral reaction to it, which means it's living inside of you. A visceral reaction, it's inside of you. Where did you feel it?
Literally just locked, like.
This knots.
Yeah.
Knots. Literally knots in your body. Anyone else? Did anyone refuse to do it? Will you speak on that?
Yes, I didn't write anything because I feel very sorry for that civilization. It's the end of history. How could the people be so imbecilous and claim to be civilized? So I just feel sorry for them. So why write? Why think about nonsense people who have left civilization? It's not hatred.
Exactly, it's not
It's
hatred.
intense pity. So if the racist mind thinks like this, and then says, I'm a Christian, even Jesus will cry if he came back again and saw people like that saying, if someone like that goes to heaven, God will go on holidays and say, I'm having my siesta.
Wonderful. Anyone else? Anyone else? Anyone else? Anyone else? Did anyone get angry at me for making you do it or asking you to do it?
I hear some yeses.
Oh, we'll talk later, okay? We'll talk later. Anyone else? It's very important that we are aware of our own humanity, that we are aware when our humanity is screaming out and saying, I'm angry, I'm sick, I've got knots, that we see ourselves and we acknowledge that it is okay and it is right. It is our birthright because we are humans. We are humans. We are humans. And like any human, we have a natural response to the injustices that have been done to us. And it is so very important that we take the time to acknowledge them by writing them out and seeing it. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I wrote it, but then I just felt like I had to burn down this paper somewhere.
Wonderful.
Just
wonderful.
Needs, yes, like we have to put it all somewhere and it needs to be burned down.
Absolutely. You are a step ahead of me, and I love it. Yes, I'm not sure if everyone said it, but this lady here said that she had, once she had written down her lies, she had to do something with the paper. She had to get rid of it. And so at the end, I will invite you to do that. Whatever your ritual is for discarding these lies, you go right ahead and you do it. You can tear it up, you can chew it if you want to, it's up to you. You can stomp on it, you can burn it, you can roll over it with your car, whatever makes you feel good, grounded, as a way to exorcise these lies. I invite you to do that. Are you ready for the second part? The second part, I want you to write down everything that is true about Black humanity, about Black culture, about African humanity. I want you to write that down. And for the sake of time, 2 minutes. 2 minutes. And your time starts now. One minute. Thirty seconds. Five seconds. Time is up. So again, we have the mics, but if you want to shout out, you're free to shout out. But I want to hear, what is the truth about Black people, about African cultures? What did you write down? What are your truths? What are they? Resilient.
Fearless, healers,
Fearless.
unstoppable, divine,
Yep.
godly, beautiful.
Yep.
I mean, loving,
Yep.
determined,
Yep.
miraculous.
Yep.
Yeah, I could do this all day.
Yep.
So.
What are the truths? What are the truths? Shout them out.
The founders of civilization.
The finest civilization?
Founders.
The founders of civilization. Yes. Shout it out. Shout it out.
The statement that I want to say is that the black man is like the pupil of the eye, surrounded by a sea of white, but it is the pupil that contains the sight. It beholds what is before it.
Ashe. Ashe. Who else? Who else? Yes.
Yes, it molds character, it brings economic freedom, it's healing,
Healing.
and it's spiritual.
Spiritual. Healing, spiritual, economic freedom.
Africa is essential humanity.
Africa is essential humanity.
I mean, as against referring to Africa as subhuman.
Essential humanity. Yes.
Yes, Africa culture is rich. Africa culture is rich.
Rich.
Yeah. Africa people, they love themselves. Yes, Africa men marry more than one wife. So.
Beautiful. Yes. Yes.
I wrote down that our culture is amazing. It's filled with love, caring, and I love my black skin, my black hair, and my spirituality.
Wonderful. Who else? Yes. Creative, ingenious, civilizing, soulful.
Miraculous, also xenophilia, forgiving.
Miraculous.
Ubuntu.
Yep.
Miraculous, I said that.
Yep.
Utilitarian.
Utilitarian, interesting, lovely. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
Highly civilized, highly developed, beautiful, complex, culturally strong,
Yes.
great philosophers,
Yes.
great history,
Yes.
knowledgeable.
Yes, yes, yes. It's true. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am. To be human.
To be African.
Ooh.
We feed the world for centuries. Everything. We are the one holding. To be human is to be African. We keep humanity together.
To be human is to be African. We keep humanity together. To be human is to be African. To be human is to be African. Anyone else? Anyone else? There is a reason. Go ahead. Anyone else? Yes.
We have a sense of community.
Yes.
So part of our belief system is that I am because we are.
Ashe.
We are not.
We have a sense of community. Our belief is that I am because we are. Ubuntu. The reason why I have you speak out the truths is because we put our breath power, our God power, our divine power behind the truth of who we are. And at CHN, we believe one of the keys of our emotional emancipation is that we look to our group. We look to our group for what is good, normal, and right about us. We write our narrative. If you want to see what beauty is, look around. Look, right here. We look to ourselves for what is good, for what is normal, and for what is right. We define that. We define that. We put our breath power behind the truth as we see it, as we say it, as we claim it, as we live it, as we are it. Period.
Ashe.
Ashe. Anyone else? So as we visit Cape Coast tomorrow, we go as the descendants of the most human people. We go into that narrative that the Europeans created with the truth of who we say we are. We go in with the definition as we define it, as we claim it, as we say it. We go into that space and we cleanse it with the truth of who we are. That is our birthright. That is what our ancestors have left to us. That is our destiny. And that is our future. We go into that space with the truth of who we are. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much, ma'am. I just wanted to make a comment, if possible.
Please.
Don't you think there's really need for us to work hard to change the mindset of us as African, as black people? We agree in this room that black is beautiful. Black is the color of the origin of life. But unfortunately, $2 billion are spent in Africa on beauty supplies, hair, nails, and creams to bleach the black color. Don't you think we need to really work harder to convince our own people that we as Africans, we as black, are beautiful? That the black hair, whether it is short or long, is beautiful. That the black body, whether it is black or brown, is beautiful. And there is no need to spend $2 billion a year on beauty supplies. I thank you very much.
Absolutely. This is a wonderful example of the lie of white superiority and black inferiority. That's exactly it. And so, if we reach down into the innermost depths of ourselves and sign with our own pen and ink our emotional emancipation, if we fully embrace, if we defy the lie of white superiority and we fully embrace the truth of black humanity, as the gentleman said, blackness is the origin of life. If we do that, then we will shine that beauty that black is to our brothers and sisters who may be still struggling with the lie. Because that melanin is going to recognize a queen or a king when they see it. Walking in this space today, something about seeing the beauty of all of you and all of our brothers and sisters made me understand who I am. And that's what we can do with our people to help heal them. None but ourselves can free us, can free our mind. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
When I was sharing that to be human is to be African.
Yes.
The two languages that I know that are African languages, Wolof and Bambara, are my first languages. To say a human being in Bambara, you say a black person. To say a human being in Wolof, you say a black person. And to be human is, for us, what makes humanity is to be connected.
Absolutely.
Our humanity is in the connection that we have with other human beings.
Absolutely.
That's what makes us human.
The Ubuntu.
And you can't break it. Because if you dehumanize someone, it's you who lose your humanity.
Ashe. Ashe.
So that's why I'm saying, to be human is to be African, because yet we are the one that are not dehumanizing others.
Ashe, yes. I just want to repeat that in this woman's, this lady's language, in Wolof and Bambara, the word human is black people. The word human is black people. Yes, sir.
Mine is, it's a critique of the black person himself or herself. Why does a black woman That's the clinical psychology of self-hate. The fads of the Eurocentric West, especially the American and black in America. Why would I want to wear a dirty, torn jeans and export poverty to third world people and say it's hip? So I see my children come home with torn jeans. I say, you are marketing poverty, my son. Look at how elegant your father is. And if I were to see you like this outside, I will not introduce you as my son. Because in Africa, we don't export poverty to people, we celebrate wealth. So I think Africans have a pathological problem there, and we have to work on it. And you, the African woman, what makes you think if you put artificial eyelashes, artificial nails, makes you more beautiful, and Indian hair, Brazilian hair? Your excuse is that the men will not look at us. Why do you want the men to look at you, to look artificial before you appreciate it? So, women, work on yourselves. And you, the men, stop being stupid.
Interesting. Wonderful. What we have here is, again, different manifestations of how the lie of white superiority and black inferiority is manifesting itself. And so again, when we're able to defy that and embrace the truth of black humanity, again, looking to our group for what is good, normal, right, beautiful, correct, looking to our group, we began to liberate ourselves from that emotional slavery.
For me, I think what is important is decolonizing our mindset as either blacks or Africans. This is extremely important. I don't believe there's anything like white superiority or black inferiority, but our acts as blacks has demonstrated, as Frantz Fanon said, black skin, white marks, expose our inferiority complex, and then pave way for the white superiority to manifest in our relationship. So as my brother rightly say, the most important thing is decolonizing our mindset from inferiority complex.
Exactly. Yes. One last point. Yes, one last point.
Thank you very much. As we progress, I think we also need to focus maybe on African solidarity. What I mean by that, in some places, I don't want to really name African countries, but in some places in Africa, an Italian bakery will make more money than the local bakery just because of the name. Where is the African solidarity? Now you see an African black man beaten on the street. We as Africans might not even come to the rescue of the person. But if it is the other way around, a white man is beaten on the street, the entire community will run to rescue the person. I think we really need to speak more about our African solidarity, which is part of our African shared values. Thank you very much.
Perfect. So I am because we are. And so when we're able to really embrace the truth of our humanity, I can look to my sister and my brother and embrace the truth of their humanity. And through our humanity, we find solidarity that we can then act on and practice in all the areas of our lives. So I ask that you hold on to these truths. Everything that was said, what we put our breath power behind, that is true about each and every one of you. And on this foundation, we start our journey to emotional emancipation, and we take these truths again with us tomorrow. We take these truths with us tomorrow. We walk in them and we live them out. And so I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Dr. Christy Hagens, who is going to lead us through a Sarabona meditation, and then we will exit together. All right, yeah, let's give it a. Wasn't that powerful? Transformative? Well, we want to close with having an opportunity to connect with each other, to see each other. Who knows what Sawubona means? It means I see you, we see each other. And so part of our healing has to do with us being able to connect with that internal part of us that is able to see our brothers and sisters and move, again, forward with understanding the truth of who we are. And so I want to ask you all to engage with me as much as you can, to put down your pens, your pencils, your phones, all of that, and just spend the next 5 minutes, maybe a little more. 5 minutes, though, is what I've been allotted, to begin to see and understand who we are. Because part of what happens, we've been hearing this all day, is the lies and the mistruths that are told about us are very pervasive, and it can become integrated in who we think that we are, despite it not being the truth. And so we want to take a few minutes to be able to see and to hear and to feel each other. So with that in mind, we're going to just take a couple settling breaths just to let go of anything that might be in your spirit that's left over from those lies so that we can do this work. And when we do a settling breath, we want to breathe in. Basically, we're going to do it 3 times for a count of 2, and then you're going to release for a count of 4. Because we know when we inhale, we actually activate sometimes our parasympathetic nervous system, and it makes us feel more anxious. So breathing out at a longer pace allows us to relax. So join me in a brief settling breath, inhaling for the count of 1, 2, and then exhaling, 2, 3, 4, and again inhale, 2, and exhale, 2, 3, 4. One more time. Inhale, 2, and exhale, 2, 3, 4. And now I want to invite you. Let me pull out my notes so I don't mess up. But I want to invite you to find someone in this room. It's going to be a little awkward because we're all spread out. But we're going to do 3 rounds where we are going to see each other, then we're going to hear each other, and then we're going to feel each other. So I need you to find somebody near you, next to you, even across the room, but find a partner and catch their eye. May not feel comfortable, but please find a partner, someone kind of near you. Turn around. You might need to look at this sis back there. Sis, you want to focus right here? You got somebody? What about, can you two hook up? You found somebody. Take a moment. And if you can, be present in this moment. You don't need to introduce yourself or anything. Just look at them. You find somebody too, photographer. You ready? I want you to gaze into that person's eye. And I want you to consider all that my colleague Chandra has talked about and shared with you. And I want you to listen and to feel these words with that person as you look into their soul, into that black pupil Dr. Joy talked about. And take this in. Are you looking at your partner? Do the 2. Here we go. I see you. Music. I see you beneath superficial impressions. Music. You don't have to repeat it, just look at him, right? I see you beneath stereotypes, projections, and expectations. I see you behind the walls that you have put up and the masks that you have put up. I see your humanity. I see your humanness. I see your divinity. I see you for who you really are. I see your radiance. I see you at your best. I see you manifesting your greatest purpose and soul's calling. And as you look into your partner's eyes now, I want you to repeat after me to them. I see the soul of who you are. I see the soul of who you are.
I see you.
I see you.
All right, thank you, thank you.
Give them a little appreciation, a nod, or a fist bump if you're nearby. And now find a new partner. Look around. You might need to just switch your table, your seats. Find a new partner.
I'm staying with you.
And we're going to do the same thing. But this time we're going to focus on hearing each other. Do you have a new partner? Just look across. Find someone new. Find someone new. You don't have to necessarily move your seats. Just move your eyes. Just move your eyes. Okay, I'm wrapping. All right, if you got your new person, as you do, catch their eye and just listen to these words and feel these words. And as you look at them, take it in. I hear you. I hear you through ears tuned in to the whisperings of old soul and spirit. I hear you beneath what you say, beneath the words that you use and the language that you speak. I hear you behind what has been silenced and hidden. I hear the voice of your deepest intentions, who you really want to be and how you really want to act. I hear your dreams and highest aspirations. And now as you look in your partner's eyes, repeat aloud after me. I hear the soul of who you are.
I hear the soul of who you are.
I hear you.
I hear you.
All right. Show a little appreciation, a nod, a fist bump, a handshake, a hug. And last time, find a new partner. Just look around the room. Look around the room. Switch it up.
This is my first time on the continent.
We have just another minute left. So find someone else that you can connect to, that you can allow into your soul.
I'm staying right here with you.
Are you ready? Y'all go. Okay, keep it moving. That's fine.
You might be
All right, now we're going to move into the last period, which is feeling. You ready? And just take in these words, look at your partner, and if you have somebody new, that's fine. If not, look at the same one, but find somebody. And now take in these words. I feel you. I feel you from the vibration of our oneness where our souls recognize each other. I feel you beneath our differences. I feel your freedom and your liberation. I feel the power of your ancestors flowing through you over generations, across space and time. And I feel your rhythm, your unique expression and energy in the world. I feel your vulnerability, your victories, your strengths and your struggles. I feel the love with you. I feel your heart. And as you take in your partner now, repeat aloud after me. I feel the soul of who you are.
I feel the soul of who you are.
I feel you.
I feel you.
All right. Now for the last round, I just want you to take in as many eyes as you can after you've given that last appreciation. So take this last opportunity to just look around the room, see who's here with you, with us, whether you are partnered with them or not. And I want you to repeat aloud to me, after me, to everyone who's gathered here. Are you ready? Please repeat after me. I see you.
I see you.
I hear you.
I hear you.
I feel you.
I feel you.
Ashe.
Ashe.
Thank you all for participating in that. I hope that you will take this Sawubona energy as we continue over these next few days together and truly see each other. Chandra, I think, is going to make a couple closing comments and then we'll be done.
Nope, I'm good.
Nope? Okay. I think we're good, y'all. Thank you. Ashe.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Christy Huggins and Chandra. Thank you so much for the session. And I hope that has prepared us for tomorrow. There's a few announcements. We are going to assemble for the shuttle to take us to the dinner site at 6:45. I know we don't have time, and we have an escort, so we will not be stuck in traffic. We have a police escort. We're going to the ATGLF building, which is close to the venue for the dinner this evening. So I hope that in the next few minutes you will have time to change, those who want to change into